Hello and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. My name is Beth Martins and I'm super happy to be hosting Crow from Crrow777 today. I'm going to get his banner up. I see that he's trying to join us. Crow, I bet you can't hear me. Your audio is not connected. If you can, maybe I'll try a private chat. So bear with us while we get a little bit of troubleshooting here. Welcome to everybody who's showing up in the chat. Do say hello. Yeah, he's trying to get his mic on. You might have to jump off and use the settings before joining. So yeah, he can see my chats. So we'll just chat for a minute or two while he's working out the technology. It always works one way or the other. And Joe Potter, I hope you're going to be here later. Nice to see you. Yvette Shinebright, welcome. And there's Joe. Awesome. Nice to see you. Thanks for that love. So, wow, it's been wild times. I'll just let you know about a few really interesting things I have recently. I'm super excited to be interviewing Crow today. And was it just last week? Wow, time's moving faster. I'm jamming a lot into a little bit of time, but I interviewed Alex Zek. That was fantastic. That's definitely just stellar. I kept calling it epic. Couldn't say the word epic enough. So I do recommend going back to hear that. And also I've been meeting some amazing people through the interview that Garrett Smith did of me. I recently restreamed that to my YouTube channel. So if you'd like to see that in my world, then you are more than welcome to take part in that. And yeah, it's turning a lot of people inside out and upside down, but in a really good way, right? Because for those of us, I'll say us, that we want the actual truth, not the truth that you got in your first dig into a rabbit hole and realized it went nowhere. And some people just threw up their hands and walked away at that point and stopped learning, stopped studying. And, some of us also have things that are important enough to us that we need to keep going, that it's not satisfying just to, park a concept or an idea or whatever it is in your intellect and go on with life. It's like, no, things actually need to work. We want to know the truth, so much has been mysterious to me in my life. And yeah, the rabbit holes, endless rabbit holes. Do you guys know that the alternative health and truth world is intensely more psyoped than anything mainstream out there? Way more. Why? Because we're harder to take down. And I see that Crow is in the waiting room now, and it looks like everything is good to go. And I can't hear you yet, Crow, but we'll have to do our little sound check now. Are you good to go if I bring you on? I'm a start on time kind of person. And I know it's not your fault. Okay, let's try it. So I'm going to bring him on. Hello, Crow. Can we hear you?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, just perfectly.
Wow, that was a little bit of work.
Sorry, you got some stress there. I know it's intense, but I was holding down the show here. So I hope you don't mind. I came on time. I have a thing about that. There's this, like, it says go, I'm going to go.
I'm with you. I like to be punctual.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. My father taught me never be late and never be early. Always be right on time. And so often that's possible. And sometimes it's not. And life's just like that. And it's of no consequence whatsoever. So welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. It's been a long time in the coming. I know I had to reschedule our first booking, but I think it's actually great timing now, because it's given a lot of time for your recent, dare I call it, obsession with the sun, which is so amazing because a lot of us don't have the time to, or the resources. I hear you've got a very fancy telescope to have done all that work studying the sun. And then so we get to have the benefit and see how you've synthesized. So we're going to focus mostly on the sun today. And I also want to talk about the earth and what exactly, I hear you say it on every single episode that you guys have on Crrow777. If you don't know Crrow777 Radio, by the way, definitely follow that. I'll share a link in the chat as well, but follow that URL to all of the episodes. You're in the 600s now, Crow.
Yeah, we're pushing up on 700 episodes.
Amazing. Yeah, totally unstoppable. You guys have been. Shout out to Jason and Rose who are there. Jason's your co-host, and Rose always is in the back end, making sure all the pieces fit together. I know I have those people in my life, and I love them like anything. And so, like I said, we're going to talk about, what is a higher-minded new era? That's what I hear you say all the time. And I want to get deep into that. I've heard some of your recent interviews and have really enjoyed them. So I know you've gone really deep with this beyond just the, if you could call it physical nature of the sun. I know the moon is kind of old news now, but I think I've heard you say some things in contrasting them. So I'd like to get into that at some point. I'd like to talk about space weather, what you think of that. And I don't want to go so deep into the FE war, because that just always gets you in trouble and wastes a lot of time. But I'd still love to hear your opinion on that. I want to talk about the calendar. I want to talk about how they've managed to screw up not only our on paper perception of time and changes in nature, but actually screwed up the time clock itself. And so I think that's a decent overview. Are you ready to jump in?
I'll go wherever you want to go.
Okay, sounds good. Is there anything you want to say more by way of introduction? The people around here I know you, but if there's anything more that you'd like to share, I'm very open.
Everything Crrow777 is located at Crrow777Radio.com. I run everything on a private server. I no longer bow to the limitation, censorship, and nonsense of social media. The social media accounts that we do hold point basically to the privately held website, is where we get, we guarantee free speech in this way. So the people who support this are helping to protect a platform that is currently not being censored in the same way everything else is. And in case you've been asleep, TikTok was just taken over. And the moment that happened, many conversations ended. The reason it was taken over is because too many conversations were getting started.
Exactly. Yeah. So we all know that we have borrowed time on social media, and our own websites, may become vulnerable. I know they've done this and that, but it is the way to go. So you guys were an early adopter of that method, and that's really good. I think some of us got kicked off Rockfin recently because we weren't charging for the streams there. So it can just disappear in a second.
Any platform. This is the problem. When YouTube and other platforms became unbearable, people went to other platforms. And what you've got to realize is some of these platforms had every intention of not bowing to censorship. But what gets done is they're pressured in ways like, how do you like your internet connection for your platform? You want to keep that internet connection? Because if you want to keep that, you will in fact begin censoring. And we've seen this time and again, and it is not an easy thing to run your own private server. It costs money, and it requires people to help with security and other things, but it is the last bastion of free speech, and that's all there is to it. And that's, we divide up the content so that the first hour goes out everywhere. That second hour, which is for membership only, is where absolute free speech is guaranteed. Because that free hour that goes out, face it, it can be pulled off any platform when censorship rears its head.
Exactly. Yep. So we do what we can to protect our voices and get them out to the people. And what do you think we're going to do when or if? I don't want to be too doom porn about it, but if it all goes down, what do you think you're going to be up to then, Crow?
Well, I suspect it's going to be something like that to get their digital money. There are a lot of people that are not with the digital money, and one of the ways I could imagine is the lights go out for a week or more, and when they come back on, the banking system has been switched over. I think that's a possibility, but if that day comes, the day that we go to digital money, human beings will have lost more freedom on that day than the entirety of known human history. Every single transaction in this world will go to the blockchain, And we will be at a point where, oh, you didn't renew your driver's license, no money for you today. Or, oh, you want to get on a plane? Sorry, your carbon count's too high. This kind of control, that's in the offing. And I want to be clear here. We're heading into a new era, and the new era, as you can witness from the consciousness of all living things rising right now, to include animals. You can go out and find a bulldog using a skateboard as a skateboard is supposed to be used. All living things are getting the consciousness boost. As this happens and we get into the new era, and we're really close to the change point. As a matter of fact, today, I think, is the actual equinox where I am on the East Coast, though they will announce it later, 5 days late usually. It is today. Some people would argue that the official age change is today. I don't think that's correct, but I'm not the arbiter. It could be correct. As we get into this new era and the vibration rises, these low vibrational systems that we've become so accustomed to will no longer be able to exist. The frequency variation will ensure that things like we have experienced most of our life can no longer happen. And what that means is we have to get through this change point. And we do not want to give up ground. We need to stick up for the things that we think are acceptable and stop the things that are not. And that's about all I can say.
Very good. Yeah, there's lots in there. And I definitely want to get into that. Your perspective is actually quite optimistic in the big picture and long run. So yeah, want to go down that road, because that's always the good road, right? If you leave people with, it's one of my complaints. I have a few complaints about the truth world, that it can be so doom porn. It leaves you lifeless on the floor, able to do nothing for yourself or your world that you are, there to benefit. And then, so, you guys have always been about solutions, and I appreciate that so much. On the money side, I just wanted to quickly say I'm going to be hosting Brennan Sterling again. I think I've tried to run him by you guys, but you feel good about money after talking to him. And it's not because he's just, saying, or, trying to give you rose-colored glasses. He's looking at the actual numbers, the actual everything. So he would be an excellent interview for you, Crow, if you wanted to, show another perspective on how all of this is going. But I won't badger you about that right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I wanted to quickly shout out to my son, who does the intro music and extra music to this podcast now. So I just shared a link in the chat, and you can sub to him there, which is part of our deal to share his beautiful guitar work. Thank you very much. And so let's dive in. What was it that inspired you to study the sun so closely?
At some point, it became clear that we were doing an era change, and it's no secret that the sun is really the main player in such a grand scheme of things. And way back in probably 2015, thereabouts, I accidentally filmed what I call the second sun. And I did the release footage of that very quietly, because I didn't want to live through what happened with the lunar wave again, where my whole life was uprooted. And I put it in the film, Shoot the Moon, which is available to membership on my site. And I thought people would go out and film. I thought the same thing with the lunar wave. And it was a year or more, someone finally confirmed it, Chris Van Maitre. And then in 2016, the SLU Observatory was doing a live stream for young people to show them Mercury transiting the sun, but they had a problem. The second sun was so close to our sun and not behind it, which it usually is, that they couldn't get it out of frame. So about halfway through that live stream, the astronomer from SLU says something to the effect of, I bet you're all wondering what that other thing is. Well, that's in fact the second sun. He then goes on to say, NASA knows all about it. They just don't want you to know about it. And I know it's there. I have known for a long time. I've been low key about it, but here we are on the cusp of the new age. And it is my point of view that second sun, when it gets closer to us, our consciousness goes through the roof. And when it gets further away from us, we experience low vibrational dark ages like we're coming out of right now, where people and living things are treated poorly and where wars happen and bad things. It is further my point of view that there will come a time in the not too distant future where it's no longer deniable because people will be able to see it all the time. And as a matter of fact, the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was designed to try to convince us that the moon landing was real, has a sequel called 2010, The Year We Make Contact. And at the end of that film, the star gives a speech that informs us his children will grow up in a world where there are two suns in the sky. And I think that is also an honest nod. I think that in Star Wars, when Luke is on Tatooine and they show two suns, that's actually what it looks like. I also think the MasterCard logo is a poke in the eye about the other body. But this is a thing, and it's here to stay. And I suspect that it's going to become a major part of the new era.
Amazing. And so how did you discover the second sun? You said you've known for some time about it already.
I had at one point when I was filming the moon converted a Canon DSLR to full spectrum so that it could see a little bit into IR and UV. And when I would get bored from all the hours of sitting out filming, I would sometimes scan the night sky, and I kept finding a bright spot with the full spectrum camera about a third of the sky away from the moon. And I kept wondering, what is that? Is that a reflection on the firmament, or what could be causing that? As I got new solar equipment, or my first hydrogen alpha system, which wasn't very big, I got bored one day filming and I started to move around, and lo and behold, I accidentally found the other body. It was about 2 sun widths, maybe 3 to the side, and 1 or 2 sun widths up. The next time that I know that it was filmed was by Chris Van Maitre, and it was in a similar distance, but a different position. I think it was down instead of above for him. What I now know is that if you film at sunrise and sunset in the visual spectrum so that you can see with your eyes, you may well be able to spot it. It seems to me that it spends most of its time behind our sun. And all the images that I've made, like the ones I provide from my website, people wanted to get the solar images I'm shooting. I have left evidence in a number of them of the second sun. I'm currently working on the 12th member solar video for Crrow777Radio.com, where I will exclusively address what I think I know at this point about the second sun. The point is, the majority of the time it's behind our sun. At sunrise and sunset, for whatever reason, occasionally it's offset a little bit, and people have filmed it a number of times. As a matter of fact, during the Canadian fires, when the smoke was so thick, people actually filmed it at midday because that smoke knocked down the glare of the sun. It's a bit smaller than our sun in appearance. It is never quite sharp in focus, which I'm not sure what that means. Maybe it's outside the firmament. I don't know yet, but it's much dimmer than our sun. I just interviewed a scientist who assures me that the highest science places in the government know all about this, and they call it the black sun, which I think is a mistake because I think there is a black hole sun, but I don't think it's that. Anyhow, that's what I know at this point.
Very good. And so I do have a video from Rose shared a link with me. And is there a good time to show that, or should I bring it on now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. See how this goes. It should be all set up. I just have to hit the go button.
And we'll run it through once. This is a
You
double
can
looping
kill the
prong.
audio.
You can see the total magnetic curvature.
So this is a video. You can just mute it. You can run the animation.
Yeah, I have to reset it up then. I'll just give me a second, please.
Well, what you're about to see is I saved up for years to buy a 130 millimeter hydrogen alpha telescope, and it shoots in the hydrogen alpha wavelengths, which is far to the right, right at the edge of red in the visual spectrum. It takes about 4 hours to capture this much data to be able to do this. And then I speed it up 500 to 1,000% so that you can see the motion. Everything in this clip is absolutely real except for one thing, the color. I film in black and white to get max detail, and then I assign the color. So the only thing here that is not naturally real is the color. What you can see here is what's called prominences, but what it shows you is the electromagnetic nature. You can see the curving arcs, just same pattern a magnet makes if you put it on a desktop with, metal filings. And in my view, this is not a nuclear furnace. This is an electromagnetic body. It is conscious and alive, which is why our consciousness is, it is because of the sun, from my point of view, that our consciousness is increasing, and probably related to the other sun that I just told you about. But all that needs to be proved out more, in better detail. But when we look at the sun like this, I have come to the point where I think I know a few things, and I've had others confirm it now, like Eric Dollard. I think we're looking at a shell here. It's not a ball of matter, and I think it's drawing the energy from counter space. It is electromagnetic, not nuclear, and that's what I know at this point. And people like Eric Dollard agree with me very, very closely. 90-some% of the things I think are correct. Very smart people like Dollard explain in a much more scientific way. The sun's like a converter, and if that is a shell we're looking at, an outer shell, you have to question where's all that energy coming from. So I think the sun's a bit of a converter, converting energy into us from counter space, for lack of a better description, and it lenses in all the energies we need to be conscious and alive, and to have a plant kingdom, and to have all the alchemical functions that allow this perfect little system that we exist in.
Wow. So good. I remember a good point that somebody made about, I'll move this for now, about the sun, and how, like, we've been indoctrinated to think of it as the ball of fire that you mentioned. And then someone pointed out how, if you put a plant in front of a fireplace, eventually it's going to decimate it. It will desiccate it. It will burn, depending on how close you get to that fire. And then you look at all of the foliage that naturally grows, everywhere and all day long, and it's not being burned by the sun at all. So to me, that was a really good indication of that electromagnetism that you're talking about.
The sun's not hot from my point of view, and the old alchemists had a little saying that backs this up. If the sun is hot, then why is it when we go to the top of the tallest mountains, there's snow on top of them year round? The energy from the sun heats up matter, but it's not hot like a match or like, a fireplace. The closer you get, the hotter it is till you get burned. That is not the sun in my view.
Right. And so then what would be the difference? Obviously, you're saying that it's not hot, but it's using electromagnetic nature. Is there any comparison that we see in our daily lives that could...
Sure.
Yeah.
Think of ice, right? What makes ice ice? Well, at the root of everything, all matter is vibration. The reason you see a color can be related to vibration, a shape, a form, all matter. For people who don't know this, go look up on YouTube cymatics. You'll see people take a metal plate, typically vibrate it at a frequency, and throw sand. And lo and behold, magically out of nowhere, geometry, form is created right in front of your eyes. That basic little experiment shows you how form is created. So when we think of ice, what's going on there? Well, the vibration has become almost static, right? It's reduced and reduced and reduced. Well, what makes something hot? The vibration goes up and up and up, and it's vibrating very quickly at very sometimes short wavelengths. And so the energy coming off the sun is that. And when it interacts with matter, it can form heat. And so in school, we've been convinced we need to memorize and regurgitate. To me, that's not learning. And the other thing our school did is it tries to make us think linearly, when all we need to do is go outside and look at nature. We can see that most things are cyclical. Everything pretty much is cyclical. They want us to think about time linear. It's not. We're having an age change right now because it is cyclical. My basic premise here is that we need to consider our reality in terms of frequency and vibration. As a matter of fact, it is my point of view that the most secret health devices that have been created for the elite are based on someone knows what a healthy liver vibration is. That way they can go in and take a diseased liver and put the correct vibration back in. Things like that. Spagyrics, or the alchemy of the plant kingdom, where so many effective remedies are created. And I'm not talking about the drugs we're used to that just deal with the symptoms. I'm talking about curing, actual remedies. That is basically based on a vibration. Almost all of it made from plant material. And so what is it of the plant that's going into that liquid that we call a remedy? Well, it's the vibration of that basil plant or that sage plant or whatever plant it is. This has struck me so firmly that when I go out into my garden now and I look at plants, I try to, in my mind, work out, is that a higher vibration or a lower vibration? Is there a lot of detail? Are there many, many petals? What color is it? And if there are 100 petals as opposed to 5, it appears to me that that's probably a higher vibration. If you took a plant like most people are familiar with the stinging nettle plants that are so beautiful, that get so tall, look at the complexity and just the number of striations and all the things going on. That's probably a very high vibrational plant. And the colors are no different. Back in the day when the alchemist went out to the garden to make a remedy, he would look at these things, the color, the number of petals, all these things, and instantly he would have an idea of the vibratory rate of the plant. And that's just a very basic idea to demonstrate it. But we would do well to start to think about matter and reality in a vibratory fashion instead of the ways that we've been taught with our misbegotten, elemental table.
Right. Yeah. Frequency and vibration. You're talking my language. I study that within the heart, the mind, the psyche, and the body as well. And the conclusions that I've come to in the most recent years is that raising the frequency and vibration allows nature to take its course. So I just always want to throw this in, because we think that a high vibration would equal healing, and it's actually not true. But it makes healing more possible than the low vibration would be. And there's still a force that is no vibration, that is not a frequency, that I would call, the source or God, whatever, we lack words to describe the nameless there. But that's my take on the frequency and vibration. And I say that because a lot of people chase frequencies and chase vibrations, and they chase God thinking that that's a frequency and a vibration. And it actually goes really sideways, because as you get high, things get more invisible to you. And so that's a whole other different subject. So I won't belabor it as well. So you're talking about an era change. How have you come to that conclusion that we are actually changing ages?
When you begin to let go of the programming, which I've been doing all my life, even when I was young, I didn't realize it yet, but things didn't seem right to me. There's a period of time when I thought I really don't belong here. Why am I not like everybody else, just content with this or that? When you get rid of that and you begin to use your God-given abilities to observe and apply common sense and apply logic, over time you get an inner knowing, which some people might call intuition, and it strengthens over time. It's like that small, still voice in your head that most of us don't listen to very much. And that's like a muscle. if you ignore it, it kind of atrophies. If you do pay attention to it, it strengthens like a muscle. And I wish I was much more spiritually adept than I am. I am working to be more spiritually adept. But what this intuition does for you is, in a very small amount of time, a word, a letter, a blink, you know something's not right. Now, it doesn't always tell me everything I'd like to know. Almost rarely does it ever tell me anything I'd like to know, but it does let me know this isn't right and you don't need to waste time here. And that is akin to the era shift. And the reason that I know what's going on is because I studied all these other places. The Indians had the idea of the yugas. The alchemists had the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, reflecting the things they find in nature and, ranking them maybe by vibration, but how noble they are, maybe from lead as the bottom all the way up to gold, these ideas. And when you begin to associate it, then you begin to observe. And I don't think it's really arguable right now that we can see consciousness lifting. And when we see the consciousness lifting, there are accounts of why that is. The Vedics, a long time ago, said there was a binary to our sun. And they described a situation for when the binary gets further away from us, we experience dark ages with low vibration and low consciousness, and horrible things we do to each other here. And when that binary gets close, the opposite happens. Our vibration goes up, our consciousness goes up, and we begin to act much more civil and higher minded. And I think it's indisputable that we can witness that now. It's just a bit confusing because the powers that be are desperately trying to hold everybody in a low vibrational state. And the truth, from my point of view, is that 100 years from now, or something like that, the vestiges of the low vibrational systems we became used to won't even be able to exist. But in the meantime, we've got to contend with people doing very negative and dark things, trying to hold on to power in a low vibrational system that is on the endangered species list.
Right. Well, that's the it does matter what you look at, what you give your attention to, because some people would probably argue that we are decaying so fast. I can see evidence of it in our city here, but it's like you're saying that that's all engineered. It's all, excuse my language, fake and gay. And it's not something that, like, I think I heard you say it on another interview, that they are throwing that stuff at us so high speed. I mean, there's so many atrocities and the ongoing violence and the wars and when you really start to tune into your environment, you do realize that most everything is killing you, and it's not a little thing to detox in this plane. I wouldn't mind saying more about that later. And then so it's beautiful to see that, in fact, the reason for that, if I'm catching what you're saying correctly, is that consciousness is lifting, and they need to come along with the big hammer and schmuck it at every point. Was that?
Well, they
correct?
need a couple things. They need to be a lot fewer of us, because less people are easier to control than more people. And they need to have their technology to fill the gap, so they can have robots and other things doing automated work instead of human beings. But they also need to get iron-fisted control before the consciousness goes up, because when the consciousness is fully lofty, it's not possible to have versions of the Truman Show. And the Truman Show movie is a perfect example of what's gone on here, more so than the Matrix, in my point of view. The Matrix leads people astray and gets them to believe in things while we're in a simulation. That's an unfortunate point of view for me, because it cheapens the divine spark that you have been gifted, and it cheapens the free will which you have been gifted, the most precious of gifts. And that is what has been controlled. In the Truman Show, it is my point of view that from the first frame of that movie, he's already aware of the mind prison. He doesn't let on. Truman is alone, unlike us. And what Truman does is he makes a commitment that he is going to leave the prison for his mind. And what's ironic is if you look at the news right now, how is it that the first 2 months of 2025 have seen more air traffic horrors than the entire century that we just left behind? Does anyone recognize that there is a Truman-esque thing going on there? Sorry about that. Let me kill this. My apologies. And
No worries.
so when Truman makes his first run at trying to leave the mind prison, the idea he has is travel. When he goes into the travel agency, we used to have those once upon a time, by the way, for those not old enough to matter.
I loved them, by the way.
Right. So did I. You can see the propaganda on the wall, the posters showing planes being hit by lightning and other posters showing how dangerous it is to travel. That is the Truman-esque nature of what's being shown you right now with air travel, because Mark Twain accurately told us that travel is fatal to bigotry. There's a whole quote from him that points out what travel does for a human being that is beneficial. They're trying to stop travel because if you get exposed to other places and other cultures, you become a more worldly person. You become more understanding, and you begin to value other points of view more than someone who just stays put. When you stay put, you get that bubble mentality, and that's what they're doing. They're making people afraid to travel. They're making all these choices for us where we can do damage to ourselves or possibly even lose our lives if you make the wrong decisions right now. The third leading cause of death in this country right now, by some accounts, is hospitals. And so, like Truman, we have to recognize that the real prison here is for our mind, and it has been all along. There are no bars. When we make the commitment to leave that prison behind, we should not forget what Truman had to do. Truman was deathly afraid of the water. He could not swim, and he had to face his worst fear to escape. And he did it, and he damn near died in doing it. But that commitment was so rooted in the core of his being that freedom and his ability to exercise free will and know something more of the world beyond his little island there is a perfect allegory for what we are all facing. And if the powers that be get their way, there will be a period of time where we are all stuck on a small island. Fewer of us, much, much fewer human beings. Automation gone rampant, used to form an actual prison where your car will turn off if you go beyond your 15 minutes or however they try to do it. But even if that comes to pass, its time will be limited, because if I know anything about this world, it's not someone's plaything. It is not someone's little toy that they get to mess with. And eventually, all created things will see its end. And that's where we are now.
Right on. I like that a lot. I'd like to respond to a few things that the commitment to freedom, you are so singing my song there. That's exactly how I teach my subject, that if you want freedom more than anything, then you even want to live, or you want people's love and approval, or you want to, assume some level of control that really you can't have, or you want to be whole. All of those actually compete with that muscle, like you talked about, the still small voice that knows freedom, that is actually freedom. We're not trying to get to freedom. We're trying to see that we're already free. Like you said, the trap is here. It's not, we don't have anybody putting us in restraints yet. That can happen. And I love what you said also about travel is, that's a great phrase. I'm going to pull that out. Travel is fatal to bigotry. And I had a teacher early on in my world that said, if you cannot meditate, you should travel, because it has similar mind opening effects to it. And, it's one of the things in the pandemic that they wanted to do was give us this impression, especially in Canada, that has gone just so incredibly dark in its leadership, that they wanted us to have this impression that the whole entire world was in the exact same boat as us. And, because we've got ways to compare and contrast, and some people did travel and they go like, hey, I'm in Egypt and there's nothing going on here at all. There's no boogeyman, there's no masks, there's no anything. And so, yeah, that travel, they have made it torture now. Unfortunately, like the last trip I made to in Acapulco to speak, it was so hard on my system, and the level of intensity in the airports is off the charts. And I received a lot of threats. I ended up fingerprinted by the American Border Guards, who had always actually been good to deal with up until that point. And I think it's the tariff wars that started to make this, the hate between Americans and Canadians much more, accelerated or fake. Do you want to jump in there?
You're touching on a very crucial thing, and this is one of the foundational tools used by the social engineers that want to keep intact the prison for our minds, and that is divide and conquer. And this is the shame of what just happened in the flat earth community, which, just for the record, I will have no part of this at Crrow777 Radio. So don't bring this into my site, because it won't be tolerated. The whole thing was designed to cause trouble and division. And of all the things I've seen recently, it has violated the most important thing that we need to get back to, and that is togetherness. There was a time in this world when I was alive when we were very together. We went places, we interacted. The onset of the internet began a separation that was capitalized on by the powers that be, to the point where we now have children that don't go out inside and play. It's very divisive. And what just happened within the flat earth community has caused so much division that it is a sin. If you are involved in that, you are contributing to damage to everybody by the dint of division that you are calling and causing in a time when we need desperately to come together and realize one basic truth. We are all connected in this place, and what I do to you, I do to myself. And what can be done to my neighbor can, and damn well might, be done to me. And the blog that I just wrote and put up on my site references Twain, and this is what he said: travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. That is the quote, and that is in the blog that I just put up, trying to underscore that we have a promising future in this era shift as the vibration rises, and these low vibrational lives that we've all contended with, which have gotten so bad now, will not be able to exist under those circumstances. If we remain divisive and judgmental and hate-filled towards people who aren't like us, or who live somewhere different, or who think something different, then we are in fact loading the weapons that are being used against us. And this is the sin of what has just happened within the flat earth community. And shame on anyone who is involved in that divisive, hurtful ploy that was premeditated.
Yeah, I was skating on thin ice in a group yesterday because I also refuse to get involved. I saw a little of this and that from a distance, and it's just like, no, I'm not entering into that, for me, time waster. And but you're speaking to definitely a deeper level, and you could see in the conversation that, say, anyone who's switched out their opinion, like, God forbid that should ever happen, that there's learning going on, and that maybe if you didn't have all the facts, or maybe you've been duped and you changed your mind, who cares? It's your mind, it's your free will, like you talked about earlier. And then to make that the basis of whether you're seen as good or evil, this is another huge divisive. Like, all of a sudden you could see there was, like, if I said the wrong thing, I would probably be X'd, and so I'm always just dancing lightly in those arenas, if at all.
Fine, X me. I'll leave willingly. What right does someone have to act like they have the authority to judge someone's free will? I got news for you. We were all granted the divine spark of life, and with that came a very special gift called free will. And by the way, I am told at the different levels that exist in reality, there are levels higher than us where free will does not exist. But to get back to the point, for you to think you have the authority to judge what someone else is thinking makes you the problem. If you think you have the right to be the judge, jury, and executioner on what someone thinks is correct, whether they're right or wrong, then you have sadly been programmed as a problem that is working for basically what nobody wants to see happen right now, for the powers that be trying to get iron-fisted control through division, reduction in numbers, and strengthening of the mental prison.
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite things to quote from the Bible, for better, for worse, whatever. I don't want to get into any, argument about that, but judge not lest ye be judged.
There it is.
It's so, and pride cometh before the fall, which judgment is a form of pride that sometimes people don't realize. So it's very, very harmful. And to the degree we can stay out of that realm is definitely a bonus to everyone. I like, Emil, I like your point that travel doesn't mean just going to physical areas. It's the exploration, the journey. For me, it's always the inward journey. My book is called Journey. I also just wanted to quickly say, Goko, if you're not seeing anyone in the Rumble chat, maybe you want to jump over onto YouTube. And I'm sorry that you probably can't see the rest of our comments here. I'm not sure how StreamYard is organizing that, but anyway, back to it. So good to hear all of this, Crow. Do you want to explain a little bit about how you see the world, right? This is not a point of division or anything to argue. It's just simply how you're experiencing it, your cosmology, what you feel to be possible or even real and true. I do hear you talking about a firmament that you seem to be well aware of. And so I'd love to hear more about that.
From my point of view, we live in an enclosed environment here, just like a terrarium, or maybe better to describe as an alchemical flask. And that is why alchemy works. Not the dark black magic-y stuff. I'm talking about natural sciences like of the plant kingdom, where true remedies that heal things are made. Some of that is done in flasks, and what it is, it's a microcosm of the macrocosm. In my view, we're in a contained environment here. Everything we need or will ever need is already here. From my point of view, rocks do not come wandering in from space. From my point of view, magical rockets do not launch out into this magical thing called space. That is my point of view. And we are stationary. And not only are we stationary, I think it is quite likely, almost to the point where I would take a bet, and I'm not a betting man, that there are land masses that we know nothing of. As a matter of fact, how far do land masses go? I don't know. And that's part of the ridiculousness fueling what we were just talking about, because until you have an accurate map of this land masses and everything that is actually here, you have very little hope of mapping out how the luminaries move or anything else. Not that I think people should quit working at it. I think they should constantly work on it. But to fight about such unknowable things at this point is beyond the pale.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And so that contained environment, what are the implications of that, if you don't mind spelling that out? Like, what's the difference in that? I have a similar view of us. Say, some people get into deprogramming, but reprogramming. So you've got to, repeat this mantra or say this affirmation or try to just tell yourself that you're healed and you're wealthy and all of that kind of stuff. And I call BS on that, because from all appearances, came completely installed with everything that we already need. There's nothing missing. It's a contained environment. And so when you go out searching for the thing, you miss that you've already got that. It's just covered up. So what does that mean for you in a containment, or what would be the opposite of that?
Well, I guess the opposite of that would be what NASA wants you to believe, right? We have this magical bubble. How it stays on the magical Earth, I have no idea. It's spinning faster than rifle bullets, but somehow on the outside of this, there's this vacuum called space. All the space agencies, in my point of view, are all in the same club and doing one thing, basically trying to ensure that you have no idea where you actually are or what's above your head. The reason this is done is because if you don't know where you are, you have no idea where you can go. For one thing, you become much more controllable. But another thing is because, as I described the sun as a lens of all these energies, this is a key to becoming in tune with our environment. And I've studied a lot of cultures, and I have seen accounts that seem beyond magical, to the point where someone who's seeing it for the first time might say, this is just a fictitious nonsense account. A human being could never do things like this. And yet, every week that goes by, we are less likely to say something like, here's a monk floating in meditation. 20 years ago, the majority of people said, oh, come on, you're smoking the wrong peyote. Now, many more people are saying, I wonder if that's actually possible. And they're beginning to change their point of view. My point of view is when we become more realistic and commonsensical about where we are, and we begin to treat each other and the natural environment with respect, we begin to lift spiritually. And from what I've seen, what a human being can become is beyond magical. It is incredible. And that is why the mental prison was built in the first place, because human beings at those levels cannot be controlled. And not only can they not be controlled, there's no reason to control them. Ideas of war and other things are far from these types of mindsets. Part of what they've done is they've created a mind virus that never allows you to know equilibrium, because you're spinning in your subconscious. You're not stable. And one of the things I did years ago when all this blew up, I posted the lunar wave footage. 30 days later, the flat Earth blew up, and they were referencing the work I had been doing. And people kept asking me, Crow, is this true? Crow, is that true? And I'm just a person like anyone else. Why are you asking me? I don't have a crystal ball. So I did a couple things finally. I took a high-end optical equipment, and I just simply went out to see if I could see too far based on the curvature model, and I could. So I instantly know that's not right. People kept pressing me, and I realized this is a bit of a trap. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the things that I can prove, and then I'll say, look, this is what I found. This is what I know. I can't give you a map. I can't give you a lot of things. But the other thing I did was try to get people to get back to common sense and get back to not needing someone to tell you all the time what is what. And so I said, clear your mind, sit down, relax, go outside, close your eyes, and imagine everything you've been told is true. You're on a globe. You're spinning faster than a 30-06 round. That is spinning around a sun, which is spinning even faster than that around a galaxy. And on you go. Sit down and deep in your soul, calmly shut your eyes and imagine all that to be true. After about 5 minutes, go back inside, have a cup of tea, have lunch, do whatever you want to do, calm down, go back outside and do the same thing again, except this time, imagine you were on a non-moving plane, a flat plane that is motionless, and imagine that. And for me, when I did that the first time, I found stability for the first time in my life. And I realized something was true. And I realized that I couldn't communicate it to other people. I realized that I could describe what I did. And if they want, they can maybe go try it and make up their own mind one way or the other. But from that moment forward, I lived with stability for the first time in my life. The decisions I made, the path I walked, The dreams I had came from a place of stability. I was no longer in the spin cycle.
That's amazing. It's almost exactly the effect that it had on me too. And so is it the sun or the moon? Forgive me, because I don't, like I said, I don't spend a lot of time in this. But which one is 93? Is said to be 93 million miles away?
Yeah,
And
the sun is 93 million and the
the
moon
sun.
is supposedly 340 or something like that on average. Ridiculous numbers.
Okay, exactly. And I'll ask more about that. But I remember just hearing that possibility that it's stationary, and then I went outside and I'm looking at the moon and I'm feeling the stability, like you were saying, and my mind just went, yeah, it's right there. That is not 340 million miles away. That
Which
it's not.
common sense should see. This is the problem with the mind prison. Is it common sense? So when you go out and look at the moon, there's a little white dot that's usually, on the left somewhere. It's called the Aristarchus crater. It's claimed to be 40 miles wide. It's very white, and you can see it with your naked eyes. So what they're asking you to believe is that an object on average I think it's over 250,000 miles. I think it's 340,000 miles away, has a 40-mile crater that you can see with your naked eye. Common sense would never allow you, like a child that had never been told anything would probably never accept that as a possibility. And here's the other thing they do to you, talking about stability, is they take reality away from you. Well, the sun's 93 million miles. Did you know that the light took 8 minutes to get here? So now they're time traveling and messing with your perception of what is real. And real is most of the time common sense. And when you begin to believe that this light took 8 minutes to get here, you've been warped, man. You've been warped in a way that they carefully planned. And then they're going to go on to describe how far everything away is, to make you a minuscule speck, an insignificant speck that just doesn't matter. Well, I've got a different point of view. Human beings are special. The sun revolves around us, as do all the other luminaries. We are the center. Those things are here for us, at least partially. We've been granted the divine spark of life. We have been granted free will. We have been provided freely with all the things we need to exist. It is only the perverse nature currently embodied by corporation that has convinced you that you need to work every minute of your life to pay for everything you will ever need. These are the low vibrational systems that will not exist at some time in the future. But to get back to the point, we are special, and we co-create this reality with how we think. And therein is the real reason for the prison of your mind. Because when you are thinking horrible thoughts, ugly thoughts, violent thoughts, stressed out thoughts, the world around you forms to show the reflections of what everybody is thinking. And if you think for a second that media and movies, which are being beamed into damn near every household, are not being capitalized on, you're sadly mistaken. Maybe you should go take apart the word entertainment and recognize that words have meaning. The word entertainment can be broken down as follows. Enter, to go in. Tain, to hold. Meant is always mind. Like a government to control your mind, entertainment basically means to go in and hold your mind, and that's exactly what it's been used for.
Wow, I didn't actually hear that breakdown, so thank you for sharing that. Yeah, the detainment and the containment and all the entertainment.
Makes
Yeah,
you wonder if you should eat Mentos, right?
yeah, right. So there you go. They're poison for sure. Yeah, it's something that over the years, especially as I got into the deprogramming work more intensely after surviving cancer, as you know. By the way, there was a great interview that you did of me on Crrow777. Going back, I've met amazing people through you. Thank you for that very much, Crow. And then so I developed kind of almost an allergy to movies and media, and especially news, and that I always had an aversion to. But what I noticed is that every time I watch a film of any kind, I have to detox from it. It's left me with impressions and pictures and feelings and programs that I attached with those. And so it just gives me unnecessary work to do. And I got to get these loops out of my head. I call them worms. The same thing can happen, sadly, with music. So I'm extremely choosy with what I allow to come into my senses.
You know, years ago, I saw an early YouTube clip. I don't know, maybe it wasn't that early, but relatively early compared to where we are now, of a Buddhist community up in the hills away from everything. And occasionally, every month or two or three, someone had to go down a trek of, if I remember correctly, I think it was something like 10 miles, maybe more. It was a day's trek to go get things for the monastery where the novices were being trained and the old masters and the middle level people all were. Well, it came time that they had to make a trip down to society to pick up some things. And some of the novices wanted to go, and the master said, no way. That will do damage to you. He says, I've been at this my whole life, and I will take one of the other masters with me and maybe one of the midway people. And what will happen is we will go down and make the trek and spend as few hours as we can in the city to get what we need, and we will trek back. And it will take me 2 weeks to clear away what I've been exposed to in the time I was there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so it's similar to your body. If you don't want to have to detox as much, then take in less toxins. Like, that's the first rule of detox, is stop intoxing. So yeah, I'm in firm agreement about that. Let's see, I just wanted to run something by you that showed up in the chat about NBD. Welcome. You said truth in movies and lies in the news. And what do you think, Crow? It's sort of
I can't watch modern film at all. There was a time, well, it's always been agenda, right? I mean, you can go all the way back to World War II, and they're trying to get you, like Casablanca, classic movie. Actually, it's one of the mainstream movies, which from time to time I'll watch it. But it's got its programming. It's trying to portray how they want you to think about the war. And by the way, the whole premise to that movie is made up. There were no documents of transit in the way that make the story plot line. But as time went on, the artistic value and the creative values went down, while the social engineering for prisons for your mind went up. And what you see in modern movies is 80% agenda and unhelpful things, and the creativity and other things are almost not. It's the same with music. Do you know, I'll blow your mind, the last time the key changes were common in popular music, guess at the decade when that was.
I don't know.
Early 90s. The early 1990s was the last time that something as basic as key changes were allowed into the music. And as you know,
wow,
the music that I grew up with was as damaging as anything will ever be to our world. Before the 1960s, we had a family unit. We did not have rampant drug use. Go look at Leave It to Beaver. It's over the top, but it's reflecting something that is not made up. Etiquette towards one another. We dressed up to get on planes. In the 60s, that came to an end, and a big part of it was delivered through the music. Within a single decade, the 60s, they destroyed the American family unit. They introduced drug use, which goes on till this day, to the point where the pusher is not even the pusher. It's just a corporation pushing drugs called the pharmacy. The doctors are now the pushers. And the damage that was done with the onset of rock and roll can never be underscored, but it got much worse. In the early 90s, a decision was made that rock and roll would no longer be supported. There was one of these super groups called Damn Yankees, where all the members of this band had come from other successful bands. They were filling stadiums when they were told, we'll pay you $1 million to stop. They're not going to support that anymore. Rap is now the thing. And nobody has to be told how horrible the language and ideas in rap was, but it got so bad that the music didn't even have harmony or melody. How can you call that music? So damaging that the people who made the gangster rap will not even let their children listen to it. Much like the people who designed the apps for social media, recognizing how damaging they are, will not allow their family to open social media accounts.
Exactly. And the poison injections the doctors won't give their own children. There's some themes going on there. And and I don't want to totally dismiss NBD's comment about, they do foreshadow truth. There's predictive programming. They want to get you mentally prepared for something before it happens so that you can accept it in your consciousness easier. And they do tell us things, but I think the hypnosis state that you end up in with that stuff makes it not worth it. Then you have to spend the whole time sifting, and that's not entertaining. That doesn't allow you to just sit back and enjoy, which is what we think we're going to do. It means you're going to have to be on the ball with every little thing and see, oh, how are they using that to manipulate us? That's mostly when I watch anything. That's exactly what I'm doing. And then it's more like work. I'd rather listen to some information, a podcast like yours, or where I could genuinely learn and not have to. You still have to think for yourself, no matter what you listen to in what arena. And actually, Crow, I've come to the conclusion this year that the alternative world is much more heavily psyoped and weaponized against the people. And I had a recent guest on that I would also recommend, Kelsey Kenny, who's a cell and molecular biologist, talking about the dangers of ivermectin that's been so heavily promoted in truth worlds, and those and a few other dangerous drugs. And she was saying how, because we have, I'll say we, right? Like, you can make this somewhat fictitious, but those of us that weren't just going to lay down and accept injections and masks and boogeyman viruses, we were questioning. We're going, doesn't make sense. How does that thing jump off the cardboard into my mouth? And, things that just didn't make sense. So they had to invent enough information to take the wolves out. If you compare us to the wolves and maybe the bunnies on the other side, it takes a lot more to kill us than it does those bunnies. So that was an excellent point. I don't know if you want to comment anything on that.
Well, we all have a path forward here. And, there's the old cliches, like it's the darkest before the dawn. In some ways, I think that fits. But this is not a game. People have passed away. As a matter of fact, since 2020, in astonishing numbers. I think Jason and I first did an episode on population, which to me is another thing that's been skewed. Since the 1970s, and in many places of the world, population has been falling. As it stands now, I'm not sure Japan will ever be able to come back to what it once was. The claim in the research I did is if the birth rate falls below 2.5, that there's never been an example of a place recovering from that. There are plenty of places. When we did that, supposedly America was right there at the wire. But my point here is, again, this is not a playground. This place is here for a reason. We're here to learn, and we will get through this. And with the era shift and the rising in consciousness and all the things that come with it, I would imagine in another 100 or 200 years, this probably be one amazing place that we probably can't even imagine. But in the meantime, we have to begin to come together and put common sense back on the table and learn to treat all living things with respect and one another. And we have to weather the fact that the low vibrational systems we grew up in, they got a lot of power. Corporations, to be specific, and they have agendas, and they've been very ruthless in their agendas, and we have to get beyond this.
Indeed. And so jumping back to the sun and the luminaries, which I prefer that word so much more now as well. to the planets, whatever that is. And what's your take on space weather? Do you follow that? That there's like the Schumann resonance and a number of other factors, solar winds, solar flares. Then, and that's not the least of it by any means. I recently downloaded an app, but I don't understand it. But I do have people in my world that are tracking what they report to be space weather, knowing space is fake, but the weather of the luminaries and how it influences people's health. And there is some consistency showing up in that. Have you studied that at all?
I'm not sure how we know what we know about space right now, and then name a thing. The weather of this thing we know has been misdescribed. But setting that aside, are solar flares real? Yeah, I film them.
Right.
But the sun's not hurting us. And by the way, if it did, that's in the cards. There's a reason for that. The sun is conscious. It's not something we need to spend time worrying about. I don't accept nonsensical things like the magical Carrington event where there was this X-class flare that knocked out of all things the teletype. I'm not buying any of this. I filmed them, and what they're going to tell you is this flare it would take 100 Earths to be that big. Nope, sorry, not buying the 93 million mile thing, not buying that this flare will get here in 5 days or whatever they want to make up. It's all very local, and it's all here for us. So by dint of what I've just said, no, I don't accept any of that. Now, from my point of view, the sun is a lens. And what is it lensing? It's lensing energies, not just the energies that allow us to be alive and have a plant kingdom, but the energies that allow us to evolve, so to speak, our consciousness lift, the change. Why is everything, if everything's cyclical, why isn't it just the same every time? There's always variation. Even though a cycle comes full circle, it's not a carbon copy of the one we just did. And so my basic answer is no, I don't accept solar wind and all these things. To me, the sun is much, much closer. And these things remain to be shown. I mean, I know what I accept, but just because I accept it doesn't make it true. But if it is true, what was it the Buddha said? There's three things that can not long remain hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. Well, I think that's probably true. And so if what I think is correct in time, it should become to be known as correct.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you. And I love that the sun is a lens. And what do you do with the lens? You see through it. So,
Could be.
right. How are we, can you make sense of that?
I've read accounts where people view the sun as a way out. I've read other accounts where they view it in a much different way. But if what I have said is even close to correct, and I'm looking at an outer shell and it's drawing energy from somewhere else, well, there's a path to somewhere else right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's drawing energy as a bit of a converter, and then there it is. These things, I think, are going to update very quickly, depending on what happens and what we have to contend with. But another thing I would mention is, up to a point, it seemed like a lot of people got involved in very unhelpful things, and they did it for the sake of power or whatever, their paycheck or whatever their reasoning was. I think we're going to see more and more people not so keen to go along with the unhelpful things, where maybe there's an admiral somewhere who is beginning to realize, I have great grandchildren and I don't want them to grow up in a world like I'm helping form. I think these kinds of things will go on, but it remains to be seen how long it takes us to get beyond what we're currently contending with. And, from my point of view, we don't have a record of change at the levels we are seeing now. We have no reference point, so to speak. But what I can say with some level of surety is, if we treat each other with respect, value life, have compassion in our hearts, we'll get there a lot quicker, because the prison for our minds is almost entirely built on fearful and violent and hateful ideas.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah, that's awesome. What I've been discovering, thanks to traveling, even though it was very, very hard, is that there are still good people everywhere. So I had last year about this time, we came into back into Canada from the US, and it turned into a real big mess. I won't go into a lot of the story now, but we were detained, and it was actually really frightening. They got my vehicle and the car keys and all our things. And I said, "Are we being detained?" They said, "No, but all of your things are, including your vehicle." And so the turnout was actually very positive. The only thing that happened to me was I got my passport flagged for 7 years. And I have now been back through the Canadian customs border, and 4 times they have chosen not to detain me. Why? They see the mark on my passport.
Why did they flag it? What was their reason?
Well, we ended up bringing an airsoft gun home from the U.S. and they flipped out. And they're like, this is can be made into a real thing, And they just treated like they had, got a live one, and they fought it out behind closed doors for about 2 hours, and I knew they were fighting about our fate. There was one guy that just wanted to cream us for that, and I learned a lesson too, just to take absolutely no chances. I was a little bit, I'd never had trouble at the border, so I wasn't quite as bringing
everything. I don't want to point the finger, but I'm guessing somewhere deep inside you knew you were balancing. You don't want to give them a reason. And the most ridiculous of things, that's the problem with travel, right? We're adult human beings. I can remember a time getting on a plane with a pocket knife, with a buck knife. I used to always carry a buck knife because I hiked a lot. And I went from San Diego to Rhode Island with a buck knife in my pocket, no problem. Those days are long gone. You show up with a buck knife now, and you know what's going to follow, and it's going to be a hassle. So I think it's just important that if you're going to interact with these systems, you might want to give some thought into not giving any fuel for the fire that they're just waiting to light. And it sounds like what they did with you. It's unfortunate.
Trust me, I learned, Crow, like really, really learned. And now I have the opportunity to see that there are genuinely good people out there that don't want, even in positions of authority, that don't want to make trouble for us. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. It was it's a cautionary memory for me now. And so people in the chat are asking about the footage of the last lunar eclipse, what you learned, and that's related to clouds and the trails we see in the sky every day. Would you like to?
So, yeah, I can address it. I think we're talking about 2017, which was the real full eclipse. And some of the things that I said that I think I gained there have been challenged, legitimately so. Some people, I said that I am reasonably sure that the moon is not causing the eclipse, and I felt like it was the nodes. Some other people took some imagery and said that they could see on the edge of the blacked out portion the mountains, or the so-called mountains of the moon, that they matched up. To me, that seems like a very difficult thing to have done because of the calculations you'd need to do it. But to be fair, that was their point of view. I am not convinced that all eclipses, solar eclipses, are the same per se, and I am not convinced that it is the moon. And the reason is because I think that a new moon is truly in some way new. I think it is see-through, and I think that when it's very young, so when you see that first little sliver after new, I think if there is a bright enough object behind it, that it will be see-through. And I think that happens for a very short period of time, maybe a day or two, maybe less than 2 days. I think these things are probable. By definition, when eclipse is happening, you're very near a new moon. And these are very difficult times to film because of the proximity of everything and how they line up in the sky. But at the time, I said I'm reasonably sure it is not the moon blacking out the sun. And I still feel that way because here's the problem. The sun is an infinite light source, which is actually nearly impossible to look up online. What that means is, have you ever seen the shadow of a plane caused by the sun? Well, the shadow is the same size as the plane. That's what an infinite light source does. Doesn't matter if the plane gets further or closer, the shadow will be the size of the object casting the shadow. Like if I take a spotlight, that's not true. If I get closer, the shadow gets bigger. Further away, it gets smaller. But the sun is an infinite light source that we are told is 93 million miles away. It is the brightest thing we're aware of. So as an eclipse is happening, we're told the moon's going to come in front of the sun. Well, if that's true and the moon's being backlit by the sun, how come I can't film the moon as it approaches? I can only see it when it begins to black out the portion of the sun. It is commonsensically impossible that I can't film a thing backlit by the brightest thing we know. That was the first problem. The second problem, and the other problem is so many people have faked this now where they've overlaid images of the moon over that black disk that we see, and they're claiming, see, I filmed the moon. Well, I used full spectrum cameras. I have footage of a moon taken with my full spectrum camera that shows the blacked out portion lit and the lit portion just blown out way too bright. So I can take a full spectrum camera and light the blacked out portion. Well, I use those during clips. I still can't film the backlit moon coming in, and that's a problem. And it must relate to the idea of the new moon. But again, all these things need to be worked out and proven to the level where there's, a consensus. And that will happen in time, but I'm not prepared to buy yet that it's the moon. And there are a lot of people who think that it is, and they did do the work, and they think they can match the little rippling on the edge of the black disk to features that they see on the edge of a moon when it's lit. So we'll just have to wait and see what comes out on top.
Fascinating. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. And one thing I've noticed, and I couldn't tell, is it my eyes? Because there's been some, degradation now, I know, thanks to vitamin A. But and when I look at the moon, I see a blurred edge. It was very clear to me last night. Again, I could just see this. There's another parallel shape.
Oh, yeah. People have been reporting that. Fortune actually called me the first night that he saw that, asking me about it. And at the time, I just kind of explained it away based on what I thought he was talking about. Then I saw an image. It's very unusual. I haven't seen anything like that. I certainly haven't filmed anything like that.
That wasn't the case, right? That's not new. Or it is new, I mean.
Yeah, I have not seen it. It's really hard to describe. It's almost like there's another moon overlaid on the moon or something like that. It's really weird. And unfortunately, where I am, I have a very limited field of view. Since people would be blown away, the limited field of view I had in San Diego when I filmed everything that's in Shoot the Moon. It was so limited. Well, here, luckily, I have a 4 or 5 hour path of the sun, but then the trees are in the way. And so the problem is for the moon and things, in the summer, it's often straight overhead and I have to wait for it to clear trees. So I just haven't had a lot of opportunity to try to film. Maybe this summer I'll break out my telephoto and see what I can do, because then I can at least travel around for a better field of view.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's and then of course the trails in the sky. And I did hear you say the day that you were filming the eclipse that it was just covered and you did some cloud busting. I heard
Every astronomical event, every time there's been an event, the trails have been overwhelming, and I did boil vinegar. The last eclipse, which was not full, I was able to film kind of, but the chemtrailing, I mean, it was socked in milky sky so bad. I boiled, I don't know, a gallon or two of vinegar, which allowed me to at least get views. But what I've learned is if you can get a very hard rolling boil with like 4 or 5 gallons of vinegar, it really does the trick. I was using a little pot with a gallon or less. It does work, but you really have to have a solid rolling boil, and the more you can get, the better. But it does create some kind of a chain reaction. And typically what I've seen when the chemtrailing isn't like dead on heavy is I can get maybe a 5-mile circle punched over my head. Someone I talked to had a big cauldron and they had multiple gallons, and they said they cleared up most of the sky they could see.
Interesting. And why do you think that Crow should go to Saskatchewan? I'm curious.
If ever, it would be a heck of a thing if thousands of people went out when this is going on and just started boiling vinegar. When I first started doing it and I couldn't believe my eyes, I thought, no, this isn't what I think it is. Then I don't know, within days of when I was first learning that this works, black helicopters actually showed up where I was doing it. And I talked with someone recently about this, and they said similar things when they had orgone cannons and other things that punch a hole through it. The black helicopters have shown up. It works. If thousands of people did it, it would be amazing, because it literally creates a situation where they stop trying.
Amazing. That is cool. And I believe Emil is asking, how does it work?
I'm not Mr. Science to describe the molecular thing, but from my point of view, it seems to create a chain reaction. And it's amazing that this little pot steaming, white distilled vinegar into the air can punch a 5-mile hole. But I swear to you, it works. It is amazing.
I also feel like I've done it. It's not a super repeatable experiment because I'm not focused on it 100%, but I feel like I've opened holes in the sky just through inner work and releasing and
Sure.
meditation and those kind of things. Yeah.
Power of a human being is beyond magical. So, there was a movie that I saw recently, and it was one of the very few recent movies that I could watch, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's got Harvey Keitel, and they're at some kind of a resort where famous people go. And in it, there is a monk who goes to this famous place, and it's rumored that he's a famous floating monk. And at one point, Michael Caine, who's very old in the movie, walks by and says to the monk, "I've been coming here for years, and I know your secret. You can't float." And he laughs. And later on in the movie, they show the monk from behind, and slowly the camera pans back, and the monk is floating. People have a hard time, but there are human beings that have accomplished this level. And when you begin to think about that, punching a hole through some bad weather or chemtrails is easy to grasp compared to human beings floating. But it's been documented so many times. It's just our narrow perception that many of us won't consider whether that's even possible, or whether I should just say, this is fake, I'm down the road.
Right. And so what do you think that they're spraying on us, right? I do feel like for the amount of it, we should all be dead already, but they like the slow death because it's a sick death, and then that's the high medical bills death. What's your feeling about that?
Well, we have a very good idea of some of the things they've sprayed. They've sprayed all kinds of salts, aluminum, strontium, barium, a lot of things. And this is one of those things that makes you think, because if there's a human being that requires water to drink and air to breathe, why would that human being pollute those things? And yet that's exactly what we see going on. So I think it's pretty clear that there are some dark influences that don't require what human beings require. And if I had to venture a guess, I would say that some of those people we think are all powerful are actually more slaved out than we are, and in a much worse way. Maybe they have messed with things they absolutely should not have messed with. My point being is we can get through this. And by the way, I don't know what people accept as true, but I accept that when this life is over, I am not done. And I think there are laws in physics and other things that show energy cannot be destroyed. Once it's here in whatever form it takes. I attribute that's what I am. I have an inkling that I have had other existences, not as much as I would like to, and I accept that I will have more beyond this. And when you begin to think in this way, you begin to realize that the amount of time I will spend in this life is a drop in the bucket. And so this fear of death that has driven me and made me do all these crazy things becomes less important, because I recognize now that death is just a doorway. And it reminds me of what Fortune told me. He speaks, 5 or 6 languages and had an education that I could only dream of. And he said the opening words of the Bible in Genesis are mistranslated. It shouldn't say in the beginning. It should say in all, in every, or in any beginning. And when you begin to think differently like that, you begin to realize that the time I spend here now is a drop in the bucket of the time that I will be And when you begin to really ponder it, it's almost the old Eastern idea of there is no beginning and no end. What's here has always been here. It's just in this form or that form. And so then it becomes, from that point of view, more important to foster the path that goes beyond this. In other words, I will not knuckle under to terrible decisions for the sake of this lifetime.
Very nice. Yeah, and just back to the point about how they're poisoning us every way, sideways, the skies, the food, the air, the water, the everything. And to me, that definitely speaks to the power of the human spirit, our adaptability, how we can take, all this crap and corruption, and at least, if we don't overcome it, at least the body can find ways to sequester and deal with, and put off the death that otherwise it would cause, and just proof that spirit is actually more powerful than
It
matter.
is. Well, I'd like to point out something too. So many of the terrible things in the American food and, sustenance supply, that's not allowed in other parts of the world. And that tells you something too. America's basically been demoted, and the movies have been telling you this for a long time. What's some of the movies? A movie called Looper. All right. It's about time travel. And what do they tell you? Oh, in the future, you want to be in China speaking Mandarin. Well, how the hell did they know way back when that movie was made that China's going to be the next big thing? I'm just saying.
Yeah.
There are places that absolutely would never allow their food supply to become what ours has. And we were blinded by materialism and science, right? What's that song? Blinded me with science. It's poetry in motion. But I'm just saying, we can get through this. The spirit is much more resilient than these things. And by the way, a person really elevated spiritually will probably contend a lot less with the things we're talking about than an individual who is mired and brought down, worrying and concern about such things all the time. And by the way, I'm a firm believer that if you announce to the universe your intention, that's a big deal. I do it all the time, daily, as a matter of fact. And I put my intentions out there. And one of my intentions is to clean out my body and, fill my heart with unconditional love. I reaffirm these all the time. And in some ways, it's like the old Christian idea of putting on the armor of God. It's a very similar idea.
That's beautiful. You're singing my song like crazy there. I really want to introduce you to Dr. Garrett Smith. He's the nutrition detective on YouTube, and he, as far as cleaning out the body and in that lane, he is the most forward-thinking guy. Can read the medical papers and science like nothing else, and he's making discoveries that are absolutely life-changing. I know people use that expression a lot, and I don't say it almost ever. I don't get obsessed with anything but my own work, but this is something that I think you really, for next level, need to know about. So with your permission, I'll send you some more information there.
You need to get everything to Rose. She's the conductor at the ground level.
Indeed. Okay, well, I'll let her know. And so that the setting of intentions is powerful because, like you said earlier, we are co-creators. We're not just here receiving the creation and being at mercy. Right. You want to speak a bit more of that on that?
We do, and in this, you could hazard the idea of a matrix-like idea where everything's just a projection, a simulation, because if you break it down, why is it we perceive what we perceive? It's because of our brain. What's an optical illusion, after all, right? What's causing that? Well, it's how you're thinking about it. But when you go back to all the solid information, that to me, the further back you go, for the most part, you're better off, because we got Rockefellered in, the early 1900s. Everything that once was started coming under attack. We lost our medicine. We lost so many things to that effort. So if you go back, you can find versions that are much more helpful. And I lost my thread for a minute. Where were we going here?
Oh,
You
sorry, I
lost
was
your
muted.
thread.
Yeah, I lost my thread. Yeah, co-creation.
Oh yeah, co-creation. So certainly, I accept that all day long. That what this is one of the foundational reasons for the mind prison, because if you get minds in error, then it's like a computer: bad information in, bad information out. There are plenty of human beings in this world that have never made an accurate decision about anything because everything they believe is in error, and that is the mental prison. That's what keeps the fake bars up around us. We're building our own prison, and that's built with your mind. So to co-create and recognize that you have this possibility, intention becomes a building block. Every day my intention is compassionate love to my neighbors, even if I don't particularly like them that much. I do an exercise that I learned from an old Buddhist manual of imagining the person I like least in the world, going up and hugging them and saying I love you and meaning it. That is a hard exercise, but I never forget it because it's an important exercise, and it underscores the importance of consciously recognizing that your mindset is co-creating. And this must speak to the idea of the 100th monkey. How is it that somewhere in the world something gets discovered and other places it crops up at the same time? It's like there's a continuum, a mind stream, that co-creation thread. And so when you recognize it and you start putting it to good use, where you wish good things and respectful things, and you recognize the importance of etiquette and conduct and speech and all these things we take for granted because the music we're listening to has somehow made it okay to refer to people as bitches and hoes. When you get beyond that and recognize the damage that it's doing, then you can reverse it. And then you recognize I can co-create here. And that's where we are in this new era. The minds are waking up, they're lifting, and those thoughts are starting to head in a much better direction. Like, why am I working all of my life to give half of everything away and doing things that are basically meaningless? As we move away from this, you would imagine the improvements would be exponential.
Indeed, beautifully said. You were speaking earlier about the shift that we're making, or we have made. I'm not sure how you would phrase that, but what I've noticed is that there is an inversely proportionate relationship between vision and programming. So to the degree that programming is released, visioning, the natural capacity for it is increased. It just happens. It's not, so that ability to set intentions and put out in front of you and finish the sentence, wouldn't it be nice if, if anybody has trouble visioning, it just means that there's layers of crap sitting on top of that natural ability that we have to create and co-create, like you're saying. So just wanted to throw
Well,
that.
there's things people can do to start to consider other narratives that for most of our lives we thought was hocus pocus dominocus, like the chakras is a good idea. I would urge people to go do image searches and look at ideas that have been put forward about what the chakras are. You'll notice at some point, even though they may differ, there are plenty of commonalities, like the color, the sacral chakra usually being red, and how many petals it has, and just familiarize yourself with it. Then when you're laying down some evening, start to think about that, focus in and start to recognize these centers and focus your mind there. And over time, I would suggest that if there is something to it, this cosmic glue will fasten it more deeply to your thinking and your consciousness. And if that happens, it gives you a leveraging point to begin to take it further. Because when all is said and done, we have truly been blinded by science, because most of the science we get exposed to is more of a religion these days. Like, you're just not allowed to question this. That's scientism, where the real science is supposed to be, I have an idea, we're going to do these things to prove it, and one way or the other, we're going to show this is acceptable or it's not. And that's not what we see going on. We see the world filling with theories. And I actually made a law of theories. As a matter of fact, I'll share it right now. Give me a second here and I'll look it up. and I made what I call laws. They're not really laws. They're just things that I create to help me think about things privately. And so let me find right here. I made a few of them, like back when the UFO thing was relatively new. I noticed all these problems, so I made my personal law, Crow's laws of high definition. Unfortunately, AI came along and that had to be modified. But when I made it for myself to help me think, it went like this. Anything that truly exists that can be filmed in high definition will be filmed in high definition. That was the initial, and then AI made that law not only not a law, but problematic. So I added, in the modern era, one must know the source of the video to consider it as evidence due to the power of AI and its current ability to create anything, basically, and our inability to detect the fake. But the law of theory is very helpful, because when I was young, physics said things like, well, we're getting near to a point where we're going to have this one short equation, this elegant equation, which ties everything together and explains everything. We went the other way. We started the particle zoo and made up all these non-existent particles, and theory became the main thing, where pretty soon we're all living on theories like gravity. Gravity is not a law. They try to convince you it is, but that's a theory. And that made me to do this. Any theory that remains unproven for years is a speculation of diminishing value and will therefore tend to be applied as propaganda in support of scientism the longer it exists. And that helps me to consider things in a world where people are putting theories forward as if they're laws. And by the way, if this has been a theory longer than I have been alive, then what is its value in the first place?
Exactly.
A law is a law, right? That means something. That means this can be rolled out any day of the week, and we expect a result that we will see every time. Well, as an example, that is not gravity. And you can open a search engine right now and find the words law of gravity. And I'm sorry to tell you, it is not a law. And it's been around a lot longer than I've been. So based on the ideas that I put forward to help myself think, it's not only diminished in value, it needs to be replaced at this point. And so I personally think the reason things fall is because they're denser than the medium they're falling through.
Right, exactly. Because you see all kinds of things, the dust particles float up, and they're not subject to gravity. So yeah, it's crazy, and I love that. The law is observable and it's repeatable and
Without fail.
without fail, or at least in the majority of time. Like here's what I'm noticing, say with toxic bile theory with Garrett Smith, is that there's usually 95% of the people that can demonstrate a certain rule, and then there's going to be 5% that are an exception to the rule. So maybe you wouldn't call it a law in that case. It just means that people are responding to the same thing based on their own individual. I often am that 5%. Go figure, whatever that is. It doesn't mean that the law falls through. It just means that my body is interpreting the situation in a different way based on, I should be dead. I actually did a really good interview. Garrett interviewed me and talked about all the reasons I should be dead. More testament to why the spirit is so much more powerful than the body. But yeah, repeatable, and that everybody could observe the same thing. That it's not just like, oh, well, I feel like this and then I see that, right? It's just like, no, let's get some facts.
Talk about illusions. You can take something as simple as temperature to see the illusory way we think about things. I mean, at what point does a thing quit being cold and become hot? Well, I think that nature would show you is there's not really a dividing line where you can actually, and so we arbitrarily, for the sake of being able to measure and do the things we want to do, we assign these things. But in reality, it's like your clock on your cell phone. It's guessing. That is not the real time. When your phone tells you it is noon, it is not noon. Noon is when the sun is at its apex for the day. And so we've lost sight of the reality of what is true to the artificial mechanisms for convenience. And one thing I have noticed in a heartfelt way is, unfortunately, the more convenience we have, the less safety we tend to have. And so we trade our safety and truth for convenience. And that's another thing that really has to change. Because after all is said and done, are we really to the point where we're too lazy to sweep the kitchen floor that we've got to have a robot do it for us, a Roomba or something? Because the moment you let that Roomba in your house, I guarantee you it is mapping where you live and sending that data off to train AI somewhere. So was it worth it? You could have just took a broom in 3 minutes, but instead you unleash this thing that's doing all these things that you probably have no idea of.
Indeed. Yeah. And that was one of the subjects. If you still have time for a few more questions, that
Sure.
the sky clock, right? Obviously, they mucked with us by creating a calendar that was completely out of sync, the 7 days of the week. And, we're always, now I'm suffering a time change. So half my people are like, I thought we were on an hour ago, or or the other way around, actually, I thought you were
Right.
later.
They do that at the equinoxes, by the way.
Oh, deadly, right? Yeah. Do you want to talk about that? How they've created mass confusion and even managed to break the sky clock itself? If I heard that
So
correctly.
it's like Morpheus's little line, Neo, I think we think it's 1999, but it's closer to 21, whatever he says. We don't know. We don't have a way to know. That's an accurate reflection. We got this corporatized civil control system from Pope Gregory. I think he's 13 maybe, but we were told about before that, like Julius supposedly changed the calendar. And yet when you go to so many timekeeping places, for some reason, they are still tracking Julian time. Well, why would that be? If we have this calendar that everyone uses, why are you still tracking Julian? But my point is, when you start to dig into that, you recognize what a false reality we've been presented with. I mean, they threw away, I think it's 11 days when they implemented the calendar. They didn't happen those days. And on it goes. But what you're looking at is control systems, right? These are civil concerns, not natural concerns. At what point did we need to artificially make time zones? Well, I'll tell you, in this country is when the robber barons owned the trains. They had a problem with scheduling trains, so they invented time zones. So now there are time zones in America. Some of them, I think they're close to 800 miles wide. And yet, at one side, the east side, sunrise will happen at the same time as on the west side in that time zone. But that's not true. We know that physically you will see the sunrise at a different time. And yet we all opted in to these zones of artificiality. And these are the things that need to start to go away, because all truth is not only held, but proven in nature. We cannot invent truth. We cannot make a true thing false. We cannot make a false thing true. What we can do is recognize truth. And even if we fail to recognize it, it is still true. And this is what we have been moved away from with things like calendars. And it's much worse than that. They moved the Sabbath for all the people who are Christian. The Sabbath is not Sunday. That's the day of the sun. That was moved to sun worship, which is why there's an obelisk at the Vatican outside the front door and a reflecting pool. That's all solar worship. The Sabbath is Saturday, for those who have lost track. So why did the Pope, I'll tell you why the Pope did what he did. They want to be gods of this realm, and they can't. Well, why can't they? They can't because they can't make a fish. They can't make a bird. They can't make an oak tree. They can't make any of it. They cannot claim to be the controllers, owners, and gods of this realm. But this digital thing they got going on, they did invent that. They can claim godhood over the digital realm. The thing about the digital realm is it is a pale shadow of the natural realm where truth exists, because truth does not exist in the digital realm. And so that is the reason we got everything digital we did. Like a trust, there will be a grantor, or the person who creates and controls that system. There will be a beneficiary, and then there will be a trustee. What do you call a prisoner who's been given authority over other prisoners? You call him a trustee, right? In a prison situation. So they want to be the grantor. Even our religions are based on this idea the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And the reason this is done is because nature proves the power of three, why it matters. Because I have one, or let me back up. I want to create something. So I grab my pen and I grab my paper and I make a dot. Well, I got a dot. I can't make anything. So I put down another dot and I draw a line. Well, I've got a line. I can't make anything. When that magical third dot goes down, now I have a triangle. Now I can begin to create. I'm a man and I want to create. I can't. Oh, there's a woman. Now there's a man and a woman and they want to create. Oh, now there's a baby and they have truly created. Nature shows us why the idea of a trust or anything else to do with three is true. It is true. On some level, you could almost say it requires three to begin creation in many situations. But my point is, even though nature shows us the truth, they port these realities over to the digital world and then implement what I consider to be fugazi kind of counterfeits of the real system that they then control, and they try to subsume us all under that new fugazi paradigm.
Boom. You said a lot in there. That's amazing. And I caught your episode with Jason. I think it's your most recent Crow episode on AI. Do you want to just say something? I know you're like definitely not a fan of it, and I always kind of turn a blind eye. I had someone create a whole bunch of music in that arena, and I couldn't listen. The first thing, the first few beats, you're going, oh wow, that's cool. And then after that, it was just like, yeah, my brain doesn't want that food, or it's not food, or it's fake food, or whatever.
Are you streaming this on YouTube?
Yes, we are. So you can speak in code if you don't mind.
I don't know really how to say what's true without saying it.
Well, I'm willing to risk it. Yeah.
You can't have artificial consciousness. That's not possible. You need a living being that's been granted the divine spark to have actual, intelligence, consciousness, right? So
I totally agree.
That is also a knockoff. But we can see that intelligence is coming from somewhere. Where's it coming from? Well, I can tell you where it's coming from. But if I say it outright, you'll probably get the clip pulled down. So let me go at it this way.
Can you spell it backwards?
Elon added a little component. And by the way, if you're confused why Elon's with the savior Trump, it's because of the digital hitch. They want to digitize everything, including money. Now you know why he's here. Besides the fact that they're ripping down everything, saying, look how much we're saving. They're doing it because it has to go away and it's never coming back. And in the same way, fewer people is easier to control, so is fewer departments. They're not doing it to help you, just so you know. But he created a little thing called Grok. And Grok is an ancient demon, and you can't look up anything about it. It comes from the Babylonian era. If you do look it up, you'll find a reference to a novel, which gives it a similar meaning, but you'll also find a modern game that used that name for a demon in the game. The intelligence that AI is connecting to is an intelligence that I will have nothing to do with. Every week, I've got to make an episode image, and every week it's going to take me 3, 4, or 5 hours. I could push a button, and I could get it in seconds. I will not do it. The digital world was created for the reasons I explained to you. If you choose to use it, then that's your choice. You have free will. I'm using it right now, but there will be limits on what I do, and I will not cross the boundaries I have created for myself. There is no such thing as artificial intelligence, so when we see intelligent things happening and fail to question where that is coming from, then I don't know what to tell you. You are openly accepting and interacting with a thing where if it had a name and was shown you, you probably would run the other way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I very much tend to agree with that exact thing. So yeah, thank you for sharing. I do recommend that episode. Was a very good one. You guys went deep and shared a lot of history. And So I was going to just let people know we have been live to Facebook and YouTube. As I just said, we're also live on X, although I have a hard time finding those streams. They don't post to my wall after. I don't know why, but we're there. We've been on Rumble and Vigilante TV. Like I said, we've been kicked off of Rockfin. All of these recordings get uploaded as audios to my podcast. So you can start with Spotify, or is iTunes even a thing anymore? I like Apple Podcasts. I believe it's now called, and a whole bunch of other channels that it ends up on as a result of that. So you'll be able to catch it.
Oh, I can offer you something. So I just got notified by Apple Podcast that I needed to classify myself as a traitor, TRADER.
Oh, I heard you say that.
A traitor. And I said, sorry, I'm not willing to classify myself as a traitor.
Yeah.
And they said, if you are a traitor, then in the European Union, we will put your name, your home phone number, and your home address wherever the podcast is going. And I said, see ya.
Right.
Whatever. You can do what you want, but I am not a traitor, nor will I ever be, nor will I classify myself as such. And you have no authority to come across the ocean and impose your ideas against me.
Indeed. I just got slammed by a payment processor that's hooked up to my whole system that I use, and they kept emailing me. We want this information. We want that information. We need new information, and they're emailing me like every 4 days with a new request. There was actually something broken in their system, and finally they got a person on it because I guess I responded and someone real saw a thing, and then in the end there was supposedly a choice that you provided enough ID or you did their like magic face recognition thing, right? And I was knowing to avoid that, and then at the end there was no avoiding it. They cornered me, and I decided, you know what, this isn't the hill I'm going to die on. I'm going to do my work through whatever means. So I did the thing. Not very long from there, I get another threatening email that they need more things from me. And then I messaged the woman that had been helping me, and she said, oh, it's all good. Thank you for your cooperation. And I emailed her back. I said, actually, that was not cooperation. You forced me, and there's a very high spiritual cost, even though you're just being employed by the forcer. And, so I just had to throw in, this is not cooperation. Let's get this straight. You're forcing.
So how ironic is it that every day when we go to use the digital world, the most powerful corporations vociferously enforce their intellectual property and their copyright? What you need to realize is that the totality of human intellectual property and copyrights was stolen to train the AI. And they know it.
Right. Never mind that.
And all this tracking that goes on, I've called numerous places to tell them, take me out of your databases. Never once have I been told F you. Every single time it's how can we help? Because they know they are stealing. So at the end of the day, this intellectual property that they've stolen to train their AI belong to all of us. And these are the things that, if I run a clip somewhere that someone else owns, enforcement will follow swiftly with strikes and deletion quite often. And yet they've got the green card to go just rake the entirety of human knowledge and creation to train their demon connected algorithms. It's a heck of a thing.
Well said. Wow. How dark is that? So Crow, you are one of the most censored channels that I'm aware of. I know from just being friends with Rose at the back end how that can go at times. I was going to make a request that if people share this out, could you share my blog link that does actually lead to my website and lead to the other things that I'm doing and all the interviews that I've done? That this is my second YouTube channel. I was taken out a few years ago, not even that big, but so I've shared this link in the chat. And if for some reason you have not subscribed already to the second hour of Crrow777 Radio episodes, I highly encourage. I have zero regrets. I've been a member since maybe 2018, I believe, was my first time I subscribed there. And there's always some food for your brain and food for your soul there. So definitely recommend that. Anything else you want to share about anything coming up or what you like to?
I was able to shoot for the first time this year because I can't take my hydrogen alpha scope out in freezing weather. So on the 11th, I did my first solar filming of this year. Since then, we've had terrible weather, but I will be putting together a member-only video on the solar things, and I will bring everyone up to date on what I think is correct currently about the sun. The reason I do that is because I will no longer give my work to a platform. Years ago, I uploaded the first lunar wave to YouTube. A year or two later, I got an email from YouTube where they informed me they claimed partial ownership of everything I'd ever uploaded and informed me they could do whatever they wanted to it, to include turning it into commercials. I will no longer do that. So that's why I run a private server, and that's why the entirety of my current solar work, which took me years to be able to afford the equipment, and it takes endless hours to put together even single still images, that's all available to the membership that supports the platform. But in it is what I feel is as close to the cutting edge as we can get right now, or at least I do the best I can to get somewhere in that ballpark to the best of my ability. And that everything is at Crrow777Radio.com, Crrow777Radio.com.
Fantastic. That's amazing. I'll share that link in the chat one more time so people can just click directly on it. Click. My brain is starting to click. Thank you so much for joining me today, Crow. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I learn a lot. And I'm always happy also to send people your direction that I could in my world. I wanted to also just say, if you wanted to stay connected with me in a way that is more reliable than any social media will ever be, then one thing that I offer at my website is to do an archetype quiz to find out where on the path of purpose you are at this time, so you can see a little bit of the forest for the trees, where you would get the most benefit to do work at this time based on what you're trying for. And that's my main gem, is the hero's journey. I train coaches, I coach people, I help them to deprogram and release through the archetypes. The archetypes really is a way to find the programming, and then the programming, it will listen to you, right? It's because it's ultimately your creation, the creator controls. And we just have not been aware of that, and they've gone to great lengths to obscure the fact that we have our hands on a lot of controls that people feel not to have. So once again, Crow, thank you so much for joining me. It's been fantastic. I'm going to play us out with another small piece by my son. You can sub to him. I have shared this link. It's funny how people click on it. It doesn't seem to work for them, but it works for me. I don't know what to say. Anyway, this gives you have a chance to sub to him as well. And once again, thank you so much, Crow. It's been a fantastic interview. I'm so glad we did it.
Thank you. I'd like to wish everybody out there everywhere a happy, healthy, and higher-minded new era. Truly, we're at the doorstep.
We indeed are. Yeah, I'm glad to have you on the front lines there. All right, everyone. Bye for now. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for all the chats that you guys have been making. It's awesome. Bye, everyone.